I always imagined my wedding day would be the most special day of my life. In my mind, it would be full of laughter, a slight nervousness, and more joy than I could handle. I'd been planning it since I was a little girl. When I imagined walking down the aisle in a gown that would make even the sun pause and take a moment. The dress was picked out months ago, classic, elegant, timeless. I wanted everything perfect. My fiancé, David, and I had settled on a venue, a beautiful outdoor garden tucked away in the hills. It wasn't too fancy, but just enough to make me feel like a princess. We booked the date, sent out invitations, and started counting down the days. But there's something you need to know about my sister, Claire. Claire and I have always had a complicated relationship. I'm 2 years older, and it feels like I've spent my entire life feeling like the responsible one. I've always been the one to keep things together, while Claire was more spontaneous, more unpredictable. But I never thought it would reach this level. You see, Claire had been dating Greg for just over a year. They were both the type to rush into things, but in a way that was almost charming. People liked them together. They were one of those couples who seemed like they had it all figured out, even if they really didn't. I didn't think much about their relationship. Honestly, Claire had been in a lot of relationships. So when she finally got engaged, I thought it was just another phase. I didn't expect her to want to get married at the same time as me, in the same place. But that's exactly what happened. She dropped the bombshell over dinner one evening, completely out of nowhere. "Hey, I've been thinking," she said casually. But I could hear the underlying excitement in her voice. "What if Greg and I just got married on your wedding day? Same venue, same time. It would save both of us so much money." I blinked at her. I didn't quite understand. Surely she couldn't be serious. This wasn't just some casual suggestion. She was serious. At first, I tried to brush it off. "Claire, no. I've been planning this for months. My wedding day is supposed to be mine." Her eyes narrowed, just a little, as if she wasn't hearing me. "But think of the money. And the time. Everyone can come to both weddings. It's perfect." Perfect? How was this perfect? Was I missing something? Did she not realize that my wedding, the one I'd dreamed of since I could remember, was supposed to be mine? How could she take something so important to me and turn it into a cost-saving scheme? But then again, Claire had always been about practicality. She never cared for the emotional weight of things like I did. Everything had to have a reason, a way to make it more convenient. "Claire," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this isn't a way to save money. This is my wedding day, not a group discount." But it didn't matter. She wasn't hearing me. "Come on. You know how hard it is to plan a wedding. And with both of us getting married around the same time, it just makes sense. We'll split the cost of everything. The catering, the flowers, the photographer." She kept listing things like it was a business proposal. The more she talked, the more I felt my heart sink. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to tell her how selfish and inconsiderate she was being. But I knew that wouldn't change anything. She was still my sister. After all, she didn't mean to hurt me. I knew that. But still, it felt like a betrayal. The more Claire pushed, the more she refused to understand why this was such a big deal to me. I felt myself withdrawing into a corner I couldn't escape from. We were supposed to be family, supposed to have each other's backs. But now, here she was, demanding that I share my wedding day with her and share my honeymoon too. It wasn't enough that she wanted the same date, the same venue. Now, she wanted to be part of my honeymoon too. She had some idea that we should all go to the same resort. Because it'll be so much more fun if we all go together. It was like living in a nightmare. I could feel the steam rising inside me. The anger that I didn't know how to express. I had been dreaming of a quiet honeymoon. Just me and David. Basking in our new life together. I didn't want to share that with anyone. But every time, I tried to stand firm. Claire would counter with logic, it's just a honeymoon. We could all just hang out by the pool. It would be so much fun. I hated that word. Fun. Everything was always about fun. For Claire. There was never any thought for how I might feel. The breaking point came a week before the wedding. Claire had already arranged to stay at the same hotel as David and I. She had even booked a suite right next to ours. She just assumed that this was fine. I felt like I was going to lose it. This wasn't just about the wedding anymore. This was about my whole life feeling overshadowed by Claire's needs. I told David I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't let this go on. And finally, I made the decision to talk to Claire one last time. I told her that if she didn't back off, I wouldn't let her ruin my wedding or my honeymoon. It was time for me to put my foot down. No matter the consequences. In the end, I held my ground. Claire had to cancel the hotel reservation. And though she was upset, she finally understood that I wasn't trying to hurt her. I wasn't trying to exclude her. But my wedding was my day. The rest of the wedding went on without a hitch. Claire and Greg had a beautiful wedding of their own. Just not on the same day as mine. We both got what we wanted in the end. And I realized that the best way to honor our relationship was to stand firm when it mattered. David and I spent our honeymoon alone. In peace. It was everything I had wanted it to be. I never expected the journey to be so complicated. But in the end, I learned that sometimes standing up for yourself is the most important thing you can do even with family. I had my perfect day. And I was finally free to enjoy it. Without compromise. And as for Claire, we were closer than ever after that. Maybe it was because I finally told her how I felt. Or maybe because we both understood what it meant to let go of control. But the wedding wasn't the end of our story. It was just the beginning. The dust settled after the wedding. And I thought I could finally breathe. I had my day. Claire had hers. And somehow, we had both survived. I was proud of myself for standing my ground. But the truth was, I still felt unsettled. The relationship between Claire and me, the one I thought was strong, had been stretched thin. Our families were fine with the resolution, there was no major fallout. And in the end, the wedding was everything I had hoped for. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something deeper had shifted between Claire and me. It wasn't just the wedding day, no. It was more about how we had navigated it. How I had navigated it. Claire's insistence on joining everything, on making everything about herself, had always been a part of her. But this time, I didn't bend. Didn't allow her to trample all over my emotions. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had to protect her. Or make her feel comfortable. For once, I was standing up for me. And I was so relieved. But Claire, I could tell, was hurt. Not in the way I expected. She didn't sulk. She didn't raise her voice. Instead, she was quieter than usual. Almost as if she was trying to process what had happened. What I had done. I hated seeing her like that. It didn't feel like a victory anymore. It felt lonely. The phone calls after the wedding were awkward at first. Claire didn't call me every day like she used to. Didn't ask me for advice, or share her usual chatter. We'd had moments before where we'd joke about life and laugh at everything. But now it was like we were both circling each other, careful. Almost shy. I wondered if she was angry with me. It wasn't until a month later, when I returned to work after the honeymoon, that I got a message from Claire. It wasn't a long message, but it was the first real step toward mending things. Message from Claire. Hey. I've been thinking. I know things were weird during the wedding. I get it. I was selfish. I just wanted everything to go smoothly. For both of us. I know I messed up. But I miss you. I hope we can talk soon. Love. See. I sat staring at my phone for a long time, unsure how to respond. I felt relief at first. Then an overwhelming sense of guilt. Had I been too harsh? I didn't want to hurt Claire. I knew she meant well. In her own twisted way. I didn't want to lose my sister. But as I typed my response, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time, a sense of clarity. This wasn't about choosing between her and my happiness. It was about accepting that my happiness was just as important as hers. I wasn't the older sister anymore. The one who had to fix everything for her. I wasn't the one who had to compromise my joy for her comfort. And so, I wrote back. Message to Claire. I miss you too. I'm glad you reached out. I don't think you're selfish. Claire. I think you just didn't realize how much I needed that day for myself. I was upset. Yes. But I never wanted to hurt you. Let's figure this out. Let's not let this get in the way of us. Love. M. We met up a few days later. At the small cafe we used to frequent when we were younger. I ordered a latte. She got a cappuccino. There was a comfortable silence between us at first. The kind that only exists between people who've known each other their whole lives. I was nervous. But also oddly at peace. It was hard to describe. Okay. Claire started. Her voice softer than usual. I know you've been avoiding me. And I get it. I was a pain. I don't know what I was thinking. I thought you would just go along with it like you always do. She paused, looking down at her cup. But I didn't realize how much it meant to you. I should've. I guess. I'm sorry. Her words were unexpected. I had prepared for something more defensive. For a battle. But instead, Claire was being vulnerable, something I hadn't seen from her in years. She was acknowledging the hurt she had caused. Not just to me, but to herself as well. I was afraid, she continued. Not looking at me. I was afraid that if we didn't do everything together, we'd drift apart. I didn't want that. I don't know how to deal with that. I felt a pang in my chest. I knew Claire better than anyone. This was big for her. She had always been so independent, so carefree, that I hadn't realized she was terrified of losing the connection between us. You're not going to lose me, Claire, I said, my voice quieter than usual. I just needed you to see that this was my moment too. I needed you to respect that. But I don't want to lose you either. It was a moment of honesty between us. The kind that was long overdue. We both realized something in that instant. We had both been holding onto old patterns. Ways of relating to each other that didn't serve us anymore. We were both growing up. And that meant changing. For better or worse. We were becoming different people. But that didn't mean we had to let go of each other. The months that followed were some of the best we'd had in years. It wasn't perfect. Of course. We still had our moments of tension. But we learned to navigate them better. I think we both grew. In ways that surprised us both. Claire got married the following year. But this time, there was no overlap. There was no drama about venues or honeymoons. She respected my space. And I respected hers. Her wedding was beautiful. Though in a very different way than mine had been. It was quirky and spontaneous. Just like Claire. And it was everything she had wanted. I was honored to be there as her sister. Her friend. Not just her older sibling. I think we both realized that it wasn't about the big moments anymore. It was about understanding each other in the small, quiet moments. The ones that didn't require anyone to compete. As for David and I, we were happy. Building our life together. The honeymoon had been everything I'd dreamed of: quiet. Peaceful. Just the two of us. It was a time to reconnect. To share our hopes for the future. To enjoy our love in its simplest form. It turned out that what I'd thought was a betrayal, what I had feared would tear my relationship with Claire apart, was the very thing that brought us closer. It was through standing up for myself. Through asserting my boundaries. That I had strengthened my relationship with her. And maybe that was the greatest lesson I could have learned from my wedding. Family doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be easy. But as long as we are honest. As long as we try. We can find our way back to each other. And that's enough. It was nearly 6 months after the wedding. And I found myself reflecting more on the person I had become since that turbulent time. Claire and I had both shifted. And while I could see the change in her, I was beginning to recognize changes in myself too. The months of figuring out how to navigate a complex relationship with my sister had forced me to look inward in ways I hadn't expected. It wasn't just about standing my ground anymore. It was about understanding why I needed to stand my ground in the first place. Life had a way of moving on. Of course. The days went by quickly. But in a way, I had more space to think. More space to breathe. I had allowed myself to reclaim what was mine. And though I didn't know it at the time, reclaiming my boundaries had been the first step toward a deeper, more meaningful connection with those around me, not just Claire, but also David. David and I had always been close. But after the wedding, after everything with Claire, something shifted between us as well. It was subtle at first. Like a quiet understanding between us that we hadn't had before. The pressure was off. There were no more looming wedding details. No more arguments about where to go on our honeymoon. No more family expectations to live up to. It was just us. And that felt like a relief. David had always been my rock. I'd known that since the day we met. But I didn't realize how much I had been relying on him to smooth over the rough edges of my own life. Especially in relation to Claire. I was used to having him as the buffer between me and everyone else. But the wedding had shown me that I needed to be more than just someone who leaned on him for support. I needed to be someone who could stand up for herself, who could speak her mind and take responsibility for her own happiness. One night, after dinner, we sat on the couch together. The soft hum of the evening in the background. I had just come home from a work meeting and was exhausted. But David wasn't his usual chatty self. He seemed quieter. I tilted my head, studying him for a moment before speaking. "You've been a little distant lately. Is something on your mind?" He looked at me, his eyes softening. It was as if he had been waiting for the right moment to share something. "I guess I've been thinking a lot," he began slowly. His voice thoughtful. "I think the wedding brought a lot of stuff up for you. For both of us. And I've noticed how much more confident you've become since then. It's like you found something inside you that I didn't even know was there. I felt a wave of warmth wash over me. It was strange to hear him say that. David had always believed in me. But this acknowledgement, this recognition of my own growth was different. It made me realize that I was finally beginning to believe in myself. 2. You're right. I said quietly. I think I've changed. The wedding was harder than I thought it would be. And I thought I was just going to get through it. But something about standing up for myself. I didn't realize how much I had been letting other people dictate my life. Especially with Claire. I had to let go of a lot of expectations I didn't even know I was holding on to. David reached over and took my hand in his. It was a simple gesture. But it meant the world to me. I'm proud of you, he said. His voice full of warmth. I don't think you even realize how much strength you have. But I'm glad you found it. For the first time in a long time. I felt truly seen. It wasn't about the wedding. Or the conflict with Claire. Or the honeymoon that had been just for us. It was about the fact that David saw me for who I truly was, the woman who had learned to be strong. To speak her mind. To find her own path. The weeks that followed were filled with subtle shifts, small conversations with Claire. Deeper moments with David. And an unexpected quiet peace that I hadn't realized I was missing. But life, in all its beauty and complexity, wasn't without its challenges. It wasn't long before the opportunity to make amends with Claire presented itself in a way I didn't expect. It happened one afternoon when my mom called me to ask if I would join her, Claire, and Greg for lunch. It had been a while since we had all gotten together outside of family events. And I hesitated for a moment. Part of me didn't want to go. I was afraid it would be awkward. That the tensions between Claire and me would surface once again. But then I remembered what had been said during our conversation a few months ago, that we were both willing to try. To rebuild. It was time to take that next step. I arrived early at the restaurant. A small, family-owned place that had been a favorite of ours for years. When I walked in, I saw Claire already seated, waiting for me. Her face lit up when she saw me. But it wasn't just a polite smile. It was a genuine one that made my heart swell. Hey, she said, standing up as I approached. I'm glad you came. I smiled back. A little uncertain, but willing to embrace whatever came next. Me too, I said. It's been a while. We sat down at the table. And for a while, the conversation was light. Easy. We talked about work. About life. About random things. But then, the moment came, the moment that I had been waiting for but didn't know how to approach. Claire looked at me across the table. Her eyes more serious now. I've been thinking about everything, she said softly. About how I pushed you. How I tried to make your day about me. And I didn't realize how much that hurt you. I'm really sorry. I want us to be okay. I want to be a better sister. I felt a lump in my throat. This wasn't the Claire I had known. This wasn't the girl who had always wanted things her way, without thinking of the consequences. This was growth. And it was happening in front of me. I know you didn't mean to hurt me, Claire, I said. My voice steady but filled with emotion. I think we both needed this distance. Though, I needed to learn how to set boundaries. And you needed to understand what I really needed. But I think we're getting there. We're both getting there. And with that, I realized that the moment had come. The moment when we finally stopped being the people we had been and instead We became the sisters we needed each other to be. The months that followed were filled with new experiences. Claire and I grew closer, finding new ways to support one another without stepping on each other's toes. We went on weekend trips together. Just the two of us. We laughed. We argued. But we always came back stronger. The bond we had was deeper now. More authentic. And though we both knew that there would still be challenges ahead, we were no longer afraid to face them together. David and I settled into our new life. We continued to build our relationship with open communication, sharing our dreams, fears, and everyday moments. We bought our first home together. A small place in the suburbs that we quickly turned into a cozy haven. And Claire? Well, she and Greg were doing well. And despite everything that had happened, I knew we would always be there for each other. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth it. And now, looking back, I could say with certainty that the wedding, the drama, the misunderstandings, the confrontations had brought about something beautiful. It had brought about change for all of us.